Today, we're in Fresno, California at Turner's Auto Wrecking, checking out 7 decades worth of rust-free sheet metal. This is Roadkill's Junkyard Gold. I'm Steve Mignonti, hot rod historian, author, and lover of all things cars. I travel all across the country to uncover the forgotten and hidden gems from the automotive world. And now, I'm on the hunt for the next Roadkill Junkyard Rescue project. This is Roadkill's Junkyard Gold. Turner's Auto Wrecking is located in Fresno, California, which for over a century has been a hotbed of agricultural production. Millions of people made their livings here off the land, from bankers to tractor drivers. And since 1958, this is where they brought their cars when they died. As a result of the arid climate, there's a wide variety of surviving vehicles out here of every make, including a lot of cars from the days before the Big Three. And you might recognize this yard from episode 31 of Roadkill, where Freiberger and Finnegan did their first junkyard rescue of the 1950 GMC truck they nicknamed Pigpen. After sitting for almost 30 years in the yard, the guys got it up and running in 5 days and almost made it home. Now I'm back at the scene of the crime because there are plenty of other cars in need of rescue here, and I know that Freiberger and Finnegan like cars with dirt and they like racing, so I'm going to try and find something that combines those two things. Well, there's a ton of stuff to do here, a lot of cars to see. Let's get it started right now. A lot of car makers' names have come and gone in the years since World War II. Oldsmobile, gone. Plymouth, gone. And then there were the independents, American Motors, Studebaker, Kaiser, Fraser, and Hudson. We're looking at right here, a 1951 Hudson Pacemaker. Now, these cars were very advanced for the post-war era. In fact, I would say these are the most advanced cars on the post-war scene. They featured something called step-down design. Step-down design is a reference to the fact that Hudson used body-on-frame construction, but the frame filled the whole perimeter of the car. In fact, this is the frame rail right here inside of the rocker panel. So what you get is a lowered foot area, which you step down into. And that was their advertising slogan for the 1948 through 1954 era. These cars were built for the mid-price to low-price market and very, very well appointed inside. Fake leather, little ashtray here on the back seat. Hudson offered a variety of models. How do we know which one this is? We go to the glove compartment, where the model name was always placed. This one here is a Pacemaker. That means this is the lowest priced entry-level model. Above this would have been the Wasp, the Commodore, which had an 8-cylinder engine, and of course the high-performance Hornet, which was made popular in the 2006 Disney Pixar film Cars, where the Hudson Hornet, voiced by Paul Newman, proved a full-size sedan could turn on dirt and taught a whole generation of kids about some racing history. That's pretty roadkill if you ask me. Now, this one, being a Pacemaker, is a base model. We know that it did have a radio. It's gone. But up here on the roof, we can see how folks tuned in the signal. You turn the knob, the antenna moves around, and you can hear Buddy Holly or early Elvis. This one here does have the 3-speed manual transmission, which is befitting of a base model. It was shifted up on the column here. Hudson did offer an automatic, but there's a catch. The automatics were made for Hudson by General Motors. That's right, GM's Hydromatic division made these 4-speed automatics for Hudson and even Lincoln. The reason being that of all the things to engineer and design for a new car, automatic transmissions are one of the most difficult things to pull off, and Hydromatic got them right. Now, the downside is, in the early 50s, there was a fire at the Hydromatic plant which shut down production. When that happened, prices doubled on these things from about $200 to $400. So if you wanted a Hydromatic in your Hudson in 5123, you paid good money for it. Now, behind the transmission is the rear suspension. Let's look at how Hudson handled that. Hudson used a fairly conventional rear suspension design. Leaf springs here, parallel, arranged with hydraulic shock absorbers, but something you won't find on other Detroit cars is this. This is a Watts link. This is actually here to help control body roll, and that's one of the major ingredients that made these cars so successful on NASCAR dirt racetracks. Racers like the Flock brothers, Jim Rathman, made champions out of Hudsons in the 1950s. In fact, these cars helped to make NASCAR as big as it is today. Now, the axle itself is also something that Hudson sourced out from another maker. This is a Spicer rear axle. But Spicer axles come in many different sizes. How do we know which one they used? Well, we scrape away the grease here. And this is a Dana 44, which was also used by Mercury, Studebaker, and even in certain Jeeps. Not to be confused with the Dana 60, which was used by Mopar Hemi 4-speeds in the 1960s. Now, while the rear half of the Hudson driveline was pretty good stuff, there was a bit of a problem under the hood. In the post-World War II marketplace, America wanted V8 power, and Hudson didn't deliver. They stuck with their flathead 6 for far too many years. This is the 232 six-banger that came out of this car behind me. These also were sold with 262 and 308 cubic inches. Now, you might wonder, how did NASCAR get swept away by these engines? Well, NASCAR wasn't about top speed back then, it was about endurance. But again, these engines were not very good at making power, so sadly, Hudson sales faltered. In fact, in 1954, Nash and Hudson merged, and they canceled all the step-down bodies. They actually put Hudson name badges on Nash's. The public wasn't fooled. They called them hashes. They didn't sell. But thanks to this car's NASCAR legacy and futuristic design, I love it. I'd bring it back to life. If this were mine, I think what I would do is I'd leave the patina on it, because patina is in. It's roadkill approved with all that tetanus waiting to happen. I think I would go with a nostalgic NASCAR paint scheme, and I would hit the show circuit with this car to remind the world about life when independent car makers like Hudson had a place at the table and a place at the NASCAR dirt track. Speaking of dirt, there's lots more to be seen here. Let's keep digging. Well, I know Freiberger and Finnegan took a '67 Ford wagon from the U.S. Nationals to Drag Week. We could maybe have them do it again this year with this '66 Fury wagon. It's got a 383 four-barrel. This is a way better engine than that 390 in that Ford. The only problem is it's got no front fenders. No, Freiberger hates bodywork and no glass. Yeah, skip it. Nah. Next. The old Toronado was MotorTrend's Car of the Year in 1966 when it first came out. And with this 425 cubic inch engine and front wheel drive, it really put a lot of load into the front differential. You might wonder, how do they handle it? Right here. Here's the center section, and there is the ring gear that is found inside. Now, if you Mopar guys think that the Dana 60 with its 9 3/4 inch ring gear was the hero of the muscle car days, the biggest one, not so fast. The Toronado got a 9.8 inch diameter ring gear, this big monster right here, to handle the Toronado's nearly 500 foot-pounds of torque, and that's an awful lot of power to shred smaller ring gears, but Oldsmobile did it right. Well. A Chrysler 300. Now, the first Chrysler 300 came out in 1955, and the whole thing was they had 300 horsepower, which was a big deal in the mid-1950s. But by 1966, well, 300 horsepower was kind of the beginning. Now, this is a 66, which means it's not a letter series. 1965 was the final year for the 300 in the L series, but this one here being a 66 is just a 300. Now, the styling of this car was done by a guy named Elwood Engel, who was a Ford stylist. He did the 61 Thunderbird, the 61 Lincoln Continental, and then they hired him away to revive the Chrysler lineup, and this is one of his first designs. What Engel did was basically brought in taut surfaces, crisp folds, and really purposeful design with no wasted flab on the body of the car. And dig this, man. This is one of the 300 spinner hubcaps, still right here on the car. These are standard equipment on the 300s. Elwood Engel was big on bold taillight designs. We can see right here the die-cast frame, the ribs, and the red plastic reflector fold around the side of the car so they're visible from the side and the back. In fact, Elwood Engel also did the Chrysler Turbine car in 1963, which had a very similar tail appearance to the 300. And something we see here, too, is the rear bumper. The shape of this mimics the body here. Now, that's heavy, but at this point in time, Chrysler wasn't counting calories, and this car probably weighs nearly 2 tons, but that was standard for a person luxury car in the mid-1960s. Now, one thing I love here is the dual exhaust. These are the original Chrysler downturn tips. This tells us this car has more than the 383 two-barrel base engine up front, and we'll find out more about that in a minute. First, let's look inside. The 300 is an evolution of the Newport model line, which would have had a 3-speed manual and a bench seat in base trim. But again, this being the 300, we see the console shifted automatic. Here's how that works. When you move this shifter arm, you can see that the linkage goes down through the floor, which then moves the rooster comb in the torque flight's valve body and affects gear changes. The bucket seats actually were a big deal in the mid-1960s. They take their cue from British sports cars. Detroit embraced these things in the 60s, and they were a major part of any sporty luxury car. The dash panel on this is padded, and it really looks a lot like the 1963 Chrysler turbine car, which again, Elwood Engel designed. So while he had a lot of influence on the outside of the car, he also had a lot of input on the styling of the inside. But now we have to find out what's under the hood. Drum roll, please. It's a big block, distributors up front, and nice. It was a 4-barrel car. This would have had a Carter AFB 4-barrel carburetor. Here's the iron manifold. This is a 383, not a tall deck 440, but that's okay. This would have had 330 horsepower, the dual exhaust, great engine, good power. This green cap and this unit right here is a solenoid, which is part of the 1966 first year only clean air package, also called CAP. These were installed on Chrysler cars built for California only, and what this does, it taps into the distributor, vacuum advance, and the carburetor, so when you let off the gas suddenly, it increases ignition timing to further burn the exhaust gases to reduce smog. Only on California-built cars, and it's still here. How cool is that? And right here, yeah, here it is, man. The CertiCard is still present. This is basically a warranty card that describes who you are. So when you go to the dealership for service, they put this in their little machine, they click it, and it prints out your information. What an original car this is, a little time capsule, really. The original red paint. But I gotta say, if this were my car, I think I'd make some changes to it. I would go with the What If 300M. Now, keep in mind, the 300L was the last 300 letter car in 1965, but they came close, Chrysler did, to building a street Hemi-powered 1966 300, which would have been the 300M. In fact, MotorTrend did an article on it. So it would have had a 440 cubic inch street Hemi with 2 bullet mains to cut costs. So what I would do is build up an engine like that, and I think Freiberger would back me on that for a Roadkill Rescue, because I know Mopars are Freiberger's favorite kind of car. I think he'd dig it, except for the cost, you know, 15, 20 grand just for the engine. Now, the 300M recipe is basically under the hood. I would follow Freiberger's Scotch-Brite fluff program on the body of this thing, and I would pop the hood and let people know that they almost built a 300 Chrysler with a street Hemi in it, 1966. The Chevy Corvair was a very brave engineering experiment on the part of General Motors. After all, it was a rear-engine car, where most GM cars are front-engine, and beyond that, it was air-cooled. This metal shroud lifts away, and underneath it, we see the flat 6-cylinder engine. The iron barrels have fins. The cylinder heads are aluminum. They also have fins. Here's the oil cooler, and what happens is this fan turns with a belt, which draws air past the fins, which then act like a heat sink, draws away the heat, and cools the engine without the need, expense, or weight of coolant or a radiator. It was an ingenious design. Now, the only thing is, owners of Corvairs knew to bring along a spare fan belt. Here's why. On this complete Corvair engine, we can see that the belt turns from the crankshaft, runs over an idler, runs past the generator, and then spins the fan. If this belt breaks, the engine overheats and you're walking. Another detail associated with the Corvair's unique cooling system is the valve seat problem. These are aluminum cylinder heads, and they work fine until you lose the fan belt or otherwise overheat the engine. Then the aluminum expands, and the press fit of the iron seat gets lost. The seat comes loose and starts rattling around between the head and the valve. And this one right here, we can see this guy was probably driving along and started to hear car lost power, rolled to the side of the road, and this car has not moved since. So the moral of this story, Corvair owners, check your temperature gauge. Don't let them overheat. The story of Packard is an American tragedy. It's a story of too little, too late, and lots of shareholders lost lots of money. This is a 1955 Packard, a totally redesigned car from top to bottom. Very revolutionary. Let's take a look. Packard really hit it out of the park with their suspension design. In fact, this is the torsion bar front suspension that was used from 55 and 1956. And while a lot of folks think that Chrysler advanced the torsion bar in 57, not so fast. Packard was there in 55. But even beyond that, they also had torsion bars at the rear. Now, each torsion bar was anchored to the frame, had electric motors that actually jacked the torsion bar to increase ride height as passengers got in the car. Very advanced and standard equipment on all Packards in 55 and 56. Packard spent millions of dollars on this suspension. Another area where they spent millions of bucks and blew it was the engine. Before World War II, Packard totally got by with its huge flathead 8-cylinder engine, but after World War II, America wanted V8s, and that's where Packard really dropped the ball. The Hemi, the Cadillac, the Olds, those overhead valve motors really made Packard look old and lame. In fact, this is the flathead cylinder head off of a Packard. These are the combustion chambers right here. The valves are actually in the block, and as a result, the engine was pretty asthmatic, not really good for power. That changed in 55. Thanks to a multi-million-dollar program, Packard finally grew its own homebrewed V8. Now, these things are huge, available with 320, 350 odd cubic inches, and even 374. These actually have a 5-inch bore spacing, which means these could have gone to 500 cubic inches if Packard stayed alive. Now, when you have a V8, you have to have dual exhaust, and that's a cool feature on these Packards. With the all-new body for 55, Packard really nailed the rear exhaust outlet treatment. This here is the rear corner of the bumper. Very cool how they had the tip come right through the bumper. That is where the dual exhaust system on each side exited the car. Gotta say, masterfully done. The rest of the body, equally modern. I mean, today it looks a little bit dated, but compared to the 1948 through 54 bodies, these things were absolutely modern, including the first wraparound windshield in Packard history. That was state-of-the-art stuff seen on Cadillacs, Fords, Chryslers, and yeah, Packard. By contrast, 1954 was the final year for, well, the front rear body. These have non-wraparound, curved glass windows, 8-cylinder flatheads, and on this one here, radio delete. Basically, radio delete means that the car was ordered without a radio. And while most people did order their cars with radios and all the dashboards were pierced with the holes for the receiver, when you didn't get a radio, well, they put a finished plate over the hole, and that's what you got. Also, the fender on this Packard Clipper does not have the hole for the antenna, so that's an actual radio delete fender. Now, this is a 54, out with the old, let's get in with the new. Turner's Auto Wrecking sells parts and pieces, but also whole cars. And this is a nice example of an intact 55 Packard Clipper. Now, this car has surface rust, but still some of its original paint's here. In fact, this car is a little too nice for roadkill because it actually has paint still on it. But if this were mine, I think I would give it a Jiffy respray in its factory green and white colors. And then I'd take that 320 and bore it all the way out to 500 inches. And then I'd hit the road with my buddy driving the Hudson, and we'd take these two independents, the Packard and that Hudson, we'd hit the car show circuit, reminding the world of the days before the big three. If you know what you're looking for, you can find cash on the ground in the junkyard. Case in point, this is a mid-60s Mopar 7-bladed clutch fan, aluminum blades, and a clutch drive with a spring. These were used on street Hemis and Stage 3 426 Max wedges, also seen on air-conditioned Mopars of the mid-60s. So you buy this at the junkyard for 30 or 40 bucks, take it to the swap meet and get 200 bucks for this, right here. Well, a Porsche in the junkyard, a 924. It's more like a Porsche. These things were Corvette money when they were new and about half the car. I would inflict one of these on Freiberg and Finnegan for a Roadkill Rescue, but I can't be that cruel. These are horrible cars to work on. I'm not gonna do that to the guys. Not doing it. Nope, not doing it. You know, everybody calls these Novas, but the reality is they're only Novas when it's a 2-door hardtop like we see here. When you see a 4-door or 2-door post, it's a Chevy 2. Now, these were built between 1962 and 1965, and this one here, we can learn what year it is by looking at the cowl tag. We see the style line, it starts with 63, and that is 1963, the model year. Now, keep in mind, 1962, 3, 4, these cars really look pretty much the same. This was Chevrolet's economy model. They didn't make many year-to-year changes. 65 did have a unique grille. Now, they were available with a 4-cylinder engine, 154 cubic cubic inch four-banger was available in the Chevy 2, the Coupes and the four-doors, not the Novas. But this was the optional engine, a 194 cubic inch inline six, one-barrel carburetor, not a lot of power, no V8s and Novas until 1964. Another thing we see on the cowl tag is M35. That's the option code for the two-speed Power Glide automatic transmission. The thing about the Nova is that this was coded as Chevrolet's H car. MotorTrend did numerous stories about this car when it was being launched and hinted at. 14 bolts secure the front clip to the firewall. You take those out, the whole front clip pulls away, leaving just the firewall and the body tub. And when you do that, you can change the front suspension. Why? It's not that good. We can see here the coil spring rests on top of the upper control arm, and the mounting points for those components are pretty flimsy. So if you start driving these cars hard, well, they wallow all over the road. I gotta say, the guys on Roadkill would drive this thing into the dirt in seconds. And the 9-inch drum brakes are horrible for high-performance use. Now, this is a super sport. We know that because of this trim here on the fenders and on the lower rockers. And it's kind of ironic because in the Chevy world, super sport means high performance, but not when you're talking six-cylinder Nova. And there it is. Look at that. This is the specific floor hump that was used for the floor-shifted Power Glide transmission. Now, there was also a manual transmission on the floor that was possible, but we see the big brake pedal, so this is definitely the automatic car with the M35. Bench seat, no way. This would have had buckets up front. But on the outside of the car, there's one more bit of plumage that proves it's a super sport. And here on the back of the car, the quarter panel is punched for the Nova SS badge. This is a legitimate 63 Chevy Nova Super Sport. Now, these cars would grow to be big block powered, disc brakes, 4 speeds, 375 horsepower by the late 60s. But as far as I'm concerned, this Nova needs to be turned into an altered wheelbase funny car. Here's how. First, I would move the rear axle forward 1 foot in altered wheelbase fashion. Then I'd gut the entire interior, mount in a couple of fiberglass seats, a roll bar, a push-button torque flight transmission. Then I'd get a Bill Thomas instant funny car tube frame kit, put a big 502 Chevy rat motor with Hillborn injection, and then use fiberglass fenders, hood, bumpers, doors, and trunk. And then we'd have ourselves a replica of an old funny car like the guys that Jungle Jim, Houston Platt, Doug Thorley, or Dickie Harrell used to run on the match race circuit back in the 60s. And that's what I would do to revive this Nova in the junkyard. On each episode of Junkyard Gold, the guys from Roadkill have challenged me to find a Roadkill Rescue, a vehicle they can put back on the road, and I think we have it right here. This is a 1977 Buick Skylark, and this has been modified for some Saturday night stock car racing. But even more importantly, to my eye, this is a very rare body style. This is a hatchback. Look at that. This lifts up and allows you to put your groceries in the back, far more utilitarian and useful than a regular trunk coupe would have been. Only 5,316 Skylarks were built with this body style in 1977, so it's kind of rare. But beyond that, we can see that somebody's already rigged it up with a full roll cage, comes all the way out to the end, there's a cradle for the fuel cell, and the wheel openings have already been radius. That way Dave and Mike can put on some M&H Racemaster Sportsman tires, big fat meats on this thing. Doors are welded shut. And inside, oh yeah, this thing's been gutted out. I dig it's got a full-on Grand National roll cage. One seat, we'd have to have 2 in this thing. We'd put fiberglass here, fitting in there, vice versa. They both got to be in this car. Got a floor-shift automatic right there. No transmission, we can deal with that. Dashboard's gutted out, fully gutted, ready for action. I dig the gravel shield on the windshield, keep them looking pretty. Front bumper with retainer chain so it doesn't wind up on the track. And under the hood, okay. Nothing. Now, the Skylark was available in 1977 with a V6, an inline 6-cylinder engine, and a 350 Buick V8. In order to make this a true junkyard rescue, Roadkill needs to source everything from right here. This is the bounty. It's all here, what they're going to need. And that includes a Buick 455 V8, a turbo 400 transmission, a drive shaft, get a big radiator to keep it cool, and yeah, grab a second seat, put some big fat M&H Racemaster tires all the way around, and of course, slap a Roadkill graphic on this thing. They need to take this to a local dirt track, drive in there, run a few heats, and then drive it out of there and blow minds on a Friday or Saturday night. But more than that, I dare them not to clean an ounce of the dirt off this thing. Turner's Auto Wrecking is a national treasure. There's so much history of the automotive industry here that if this place gets crushed out, it'll be a tragedy. The trouble with Turner's, though, is that it's so big, there's another yard altogether across the way. We might have to come back and show you more of that. But for now, I'm Steve Mignonti. Thanks for watching Roadkill's Junkyard Gold. We see them here in this car here. Of course, we have Grandpa's smoking jacket. And this could have had also a 4-speed.